Thank you for joining our webinar today, where we'll be focused on helping you understand some of the changes being made by Microsoft with Project Online and how you can put yourself and your organization in a solid position to succeed. Let's get started. My name is Annie Levand, and I'm with a Microsoft PPM partner called PROJILITY. We've been implementing Microsoft Project and portfolio management solutions and developing enterprise-level applications for over 20 years for large enterprises, including everything from engineering, construction, IT, and new product development. PMOs and CIOs typically come to us when they can't easily explain what's going on across all their projects. They don't know what resources are working on what work, and they have a hard time getting consistent reports, metrics, and dashboards to make project-based decisions. We offer services and solutions in 3 core areas: deployment and consulting services, PROJILITY's core business. We provide professional services for successfully planning and implementing Microsoft Project Portfolio Management, including Microsoft Project Server, Planner Premium, integrating PPM with line of business applications, and delivering strategic portfolio management solutions to support top-level management planning. PROJILITY also offers a set of Hammerhead pre-built software solutions and accelerators based upon 20 years of experience, including a set of Hammerhead products that provide improved access to your cloud PPM data, accelerate access to visual reports and dashboards using Power BI, connect data between your PPM system with Microsoft Teams, and extend connectivity into Active Directory to improve visibility, insight, and control over your work, people, and projects. New to our offerings is Hammerhead Power Pro, which is a pre-built solution crafted on the foundation of the Microsoft Power Platform and Planner Premium. This offering is designed to help bring some of our lessons learned on this platform to your organization. Finally, PROJILITY provides post-implementation support services, including expert care, designed to assist your PMO with gaining on-demand expertise on the solution supported. We have a full online automated e-learning offering that can improve consistency and adoption for your users of your project management tools. You can learn more about all of our services and solutions on our website, PROJILITY.com. We have upcoming webinars covering sessions on best practices for Project Server, Planner Premium, and PPM processes and tools. Sign up for this and all of our events following the links here, or ask for a copy of today's deck. All videos from this and previous series are available on our best practice playlist on YouTube listed on this page. Topics range from managing your digital transformation program using PPM technologies to integrating PPM with agile line of business applications. Feel free to subscribe and access this library at any time and share with your colleagues. I'd like to introduce Rob Hirschman, a partner here at PROJILITY. Rob is based out of South Florida and has been working in the PPM space since the late 1990s. Prior to PROJILITY, he had roles at Microsoft as a field specialist for Microsoft Project and PPM, as well as working at James Martin & Company, where he was a part of a practice in Washington, D.C. area that focused on project and risk management. He's one of PROJILITY's principals and focuses on helping enterprise clients drive successful, high-impact project portfolio and resource management solutions across their enterprises. Fun fact, Rob spends his spare time playing the drums in a local rock cover band. Rob, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Annie, and thanks everyone for joining today. So we've had a lot of interest since September in terms of a big announcement Microsoft made about Project Online. So we're going to be going through what that announcement is, some of the details on the announcement, the meaning of it, and the impact to your organization. What does it impact and what it doesn't impact? We'll then get in and talk a little bit about some of the different migration options and the components of a successful migration. We'll talk about licensing. Everyone wants to know what's the impact from a Microsoft licensing perspective of making a change here. And then finally, we'll walk you through some good practices in terms of preparing for a migration, what that looks like, what the key steps would be, and ways you can start thinking about how do I get to the next step here as Project Online is being sunset. We will answer some questions towards the end. Let's just talk about the announcement. So on September 5th of this year, Microsoft came out and publicly stated on its blog that we'll be ending support for the Project Online service as of September 30th of next year, of 2026. In the real world of enterprises, that's not a lot of time. It actually gives you a little under a year at this point to do all the planning. So, what does this impact? From a technology perspective, it's only going to impact people that are using Microsoft Project Online or PWA in Office 365. It does not impact anybody that's using Microsoft Project Professional on the desktop. We get a lot of questions about that. It does not impact anybody that's using Project Server, a previous or a current version. It does not impact anyone or any organization using the Microsoft Planner suite of services. And it does not impact anybody using SharePoint Online outside of a PWA or Project Online instance. And essentially what this means is after September 30th of next year, the environment, if you have Project Online or PWA, will no longer be available to you. So you need to come up with a strategy for moving or migrating your data to a supportive Microsoft solution or some other solution if that's the direction you want to go. A lot of this decision is really based on some changes that have been happening to the traditional SharePoint platform that have been making it more and more painful to support Project Online, just from a support perspective and maintenance perspective, as well as Microsoft's focus really on artificial intelligence and Copilot. So with that, we have to look at really what does the roadmap look like for Microsoft products in general, so you can start thinking about the different options. And one of the key messages from Microsoft is they're absolutely not getting out of the business of building collaboration and project management products. That is a core business that they're in. It's over $1 billion business today. And today they offer 4 different products or solutions designed for project management. The first of those on the far left is the Project Desktop Client, the traditional Microsoft Project Professional. This is the standalone project planning tool, or one you can connect into one of the 2 technologies on the right. Project Online is essentially a hosted version in Office 365 or a SaaS version of a technology called Project Server. Project Server has actually been in market since 2002. Unbeknownst to many, Microsoft has continued to keep that solution up to date. So there was an update in 2016 and 2019. Microsoft continued to update the technology, we'll talk about in 2021 and recently in 2024. So you really had 2 options. You had Project Online, which is the SaaS version, and you had Project Server, which has a flexible deployment mechanism. Both PWA, both have a SharePoint backend, both have the data sitting in SQL database. That's for your more traditional workloads, traditional enterprise project portfolio management. The other solution Microsoft has continued to grow is Microsoft Planner, specifically the Planner Core, but also the Planner Premium, which is the one that sits in the Power App behind it, which is more of a modern, intuitive, web-based project management tool, more aligned with kind of business projects or lighter projects that are out there. This is platformed on the Dataverse database and Office 365. So today, Microsoft really has 4 products or solutions designed for project management. What's happening is, as of September 30th, Microsoft is essentially getting out of the business of hosting projects. So you're really going to have 3 choices up until this point. After September 30th, you're going to continue to have support for the Project Desktop Client. It's not going away. Don't worry about that. The Project Server, what's called Subscription Edition, will be available for your traditional PPM workloads you might have in Project Online today. And then you will have the Planner Suite, which Microsoft continues to have a very big investment in. There's a very high growth space for Microsoft. So when we look at the roadmap, you really have these 3 options in the Microsoft Suite to consider. And understanding most organizations that are reliant on Project Online or PWA today, they want to have options here. So Microsoft is really providing you with 2 key options here. The traditional PPM service, which is Project Server SE or Subscription Edition. This today has one-to-one functionality with Project Online. So if your big concern is, I want to keep things as is, I don't really want to change, I've spent a lot of time on getting users trained and driving adoption and doing configuration, Project Server SE is a great route. Additionally, in 2021, Microsoft made some updates to Project Server SE that they didn't make to Project Online, specifically around workflow. So in Project Online, there are some workflow components that have been deprecated that'll end next year in April of 2026. In Project Server SE, it was replatformed. So if you have any governance workflows or process-based workflows, those can all be achieved with the Windows Workflow Foundation and SharePoint Workflow Foundation. So essentially, it's a different workflow engine, considering the fact that this technology is actually going to continue life after Project Online. Additionally, because you have a more traditional application architecture here, you have direct access to the reporting database here and direct access from an API perspective. So you don't have a lot of the limitations that Project Online presented us with, that a lot of us have worked for many years to work around, things like OData. So you actually there's some upside here, both on the workflow side and the data access, reporting, and integration side. But really where the rub comes in is that it really has multiple deployment methods. You need to determine where this application is going to live. Microsoft's not hosting it for you. That could be an on-premise traditional servers in a data center you have. It could be in Azure. A lot of our clients put the application out in Azure VMs, and that's that. There are also third-party hosting providers that are out there that we partner with that have high trust hosting, that have Department of Defense agencies and healthcare organizations that have a high level of compliance requirement can put it out in a hosting center. So you have different mechanisms for deployment. That's just going to be a discussion and a decision on your part. Additionally, Microsoft has put out there a date right now of 2031 in terms of how long this current technology, Project Server SE, will be supported in alignment with SharePoint Server SE's support period as well. And that may extend. But right now, we're looking at a minimum of a 6-year window for support. So you can feel comfortable that anything you move to today won't go away in a year or 2. Finally, this is really best for continuing to use your PPM system as is. If you're literally looking to lift and shift it and move it over, This is a great opportunity to do that with a supported Microsoft technology. Your users don't see any difference from a user interface perspective. Project works the same, PWA works the same. All of that'll carry over. So it's a really, really nice option for organizations that have a heavy investment today in Project Online. The other option is to move to Microsoft's Planner service, which is Planner Premium and the Planner Power App. It is a much more modern, lighter PPM service. It does have some reduced functionality in the scheduling engine, as well as in the resource management functionality that's available today. So you have to take that in consideration. And maybe if you've kind of moved and you said, hey, Project Online gives us more than we need, maybe Planner is a really good fit here, Planner Premium. You can also go and fully customize the app via something called the Planner Power App. So just like you have in PWA today, you have a web page, you have the ability to create custom fields and views and tables. It's the same thing with the Planner Power App, just in a model-driven Power App, which is a much more modern technology. All the data that's in your Planner Power App and Planner in general is stored in a database in Office 365 called the Dataverse, which is essentially a Microsoft hosted version of SQL Server, which you can then report off of with Power BI. So you do have access to the full reporting capability. And this is really great if you want kind of more of a reduced scope PPM. If you don't need to do enterprise scheduling, there's no complexity in your scheduling, you're not looking to do really detailed resource management, and there's no requirement for any kind of time tracking. So these are really the two options Microsoft's providing, with the idea that you could go with one or the other to replace what you're doing in Project Online today. So, a lot of people ask, well, why would I go with one or the other? What are some of the kind of gotchas here? Well, the key drivers for going with Project Server SE, one of those would be time tracking and timesheets. This is something that Project Online and Project Server do really well, that Planner doesn't have any functionality around right now. Another area is the Project Desktop client. If you have a lot of folks that have been trained on this and it's really deep in your culture, people are very comfortable building schedules offline and publishing them and running scenarios, it may be best to stick with Project and Project Server SE versus going with Planner, which has a different scheduling tool. Also, from a complexities perspective, it doesn't necessarily mean large schedules. It can be highly complex schedules, things like multiple baselines and critical path and different dependency types. And if you're looking at things like lots of interdependencies between projects, so when you talk about more complex scenarios and things like earned value, that's where Project is really a better fit. Planner, again, has a lighter version, a lighter touch scheduling engine. From a resource management perspective, one of the key differentiators is in Project and Project Server today, you can do percent allocation of resources. I can assign Annie to a task at 20% of her time, and it'll spread that work out over time. And that's really useful if you're trying to do any resource allocation and resource management, understanding people aren't dedicated to one project or one task. Planner doesn't support that today. It has fixed work and fixed duration activities. It doesn't have fixed units. So you literally have to go in there and kind of flatten out the hours for a resource over time. If you wanted to leverage any of the strategic portfolio optimization and selection, the modeling capability that is available in Project Online and Project Server, that continues on with Project Server, that's not something available in Planner today. And finally, if you're doing any kind of systems integration, a lot of integration can carry over to this platform in a more direct way because the APIs are very, very similar. The API on top of Project is very similar versus going to Planner, which is essentially a whole new platform. When we're looking at the Planner service, Planner Premium, and the Power App, some of the key drivers here, again, small or medium-sized project schedules. You don't have a lot of complexity in those schedules, which may be enough for a lot of organizations. If you're looking to do basic resource tracking, that would be assigning people to tasks, understanding what they're working on across their projects, that might be enough. And again, if your organization's headed down the road of really having a commitment to the Power Platform, Power Apps, and Power Automate, that's all what's used in this specific application. So now that you've kind of thought through the options, you can start thinking about, well, what do I need to move? If I'm going off Project Online, if I'm going over to Project Server, maybe thinking about a move over to Planner, there's a couple of key components in your PWA environment today you're going to start to think about. The first one is all of your system configuration. If you go into the PWA settings, you'll see it's everything from your custom fields and your tables and your views and your security, anything unique you've created in there from your calendars, you're going to have to plan to move that. You're also going to have to plan around the resource data, and that would be the information that's in your enterprise resource pool, which would be not only the names of resources, but any unique metadata like their skills or department or location, cost information, if you have hourly rates behind those resources. So really planning to move all that resource data. Schedules, and there's a star here, and we're going to explain why. Taking the project schedules you have and moving them from your current Project Online environment into Project Server SE or potentially Planner, that's something you need to consider because that's essentially the source of your data for a lot of your projects, along with a lot of the custom information and the custom field data. Also, you have to think about your SharePoint sites. For every project, you may have set up a SharePoint site that has history of document libraries, has risks and issues, and any kind of unique lists you have there. Moving that and any customizations, that's going to be a part of this as well if you don't want to lose that information. There's also timesheet data. If you are doing time tracking in Project Online today, the ability to move over your history of all your timesheet data and have timesheets continue in the new system if you're moving into Project Server SE. Reporting, you're gonna have to think about, how do I move or replatform all the reports I have today? And the good news is here, it will port right over to Project Server SE. There's something called the Power BI Gateway, which actually enables connectivity into something like a Project Server database, which is nice. So, that's a component to think about. And then workflows. If you have any governance workflows, replatforming them on the new Windows Workflow Foundation platform that's there in Project Server today. And finally, any customizations. If you've built any kind of custom apps, or you have little widgets that are built in, or tabs built in, or any kind of systems integration, that's something as well. So, it's not as easy as a lift and shift. Unfortunately, there's no easy button, because all of these components play into a migration strategy. And then when we're thinking about this, there's certain components with the single star here that are data heavy. Things like timesheet data. You could have millions of records in there. SharePoint lists. You could have lists that go back 3, 4, 5. We have organizations that have 10 years of data here. Also historical project data. You may have 200, 300, maybe 1,000 or more project schedules that are in the system that you may want to migrate out. And the good thing is we have some capability and some technology where we can actually snapshot a lot of that data. So you don't have to manually move every schedule, every SharePoint site, every timesheet. You can actually snapshot that in the database and then maybe move current projects over, or current SharePoint sites. That can lessen the workload behind what it takes to do an actual migration effort here, because there's no one technology that solves all these problems. And then finally, the second star you'll see is around reporting. And this is important because while we can, take the reports you have and remap them to the new system, when you go through a migration, which is what we're going to be talking about in a couple minutes, there's going to be a period of time where you're going to have people in the new system and people in the old system based on your migration strategy. We can't just take all the data and move it overnight, especially if you have a lot of projects. So we're going to have to come up with what we call a bridge reporting strategy that merges data from both systems so you can continue on your day-to-day reporting. That's a part of any of these migration efforts. So just depends on the volume of schedules. But really the important thing is to think about all of these things as unique, but they're all part of an overall migration and what you want to keep, and having a strategy around it's important. And we get a lot of questions on the licensing. Are the licenses going to port over? And the quick answer is, from an end user perspective, they do. Microsoft has communicated as of a couple of weeks ago, if you're currently using any of the cloud project licenses, that's a Plan 1, Plan 3, or Plan 5 license, you can continue to subscribe to those and continue to use those to support your end users using a Project Server SE environment, which is really, really nice. So you don't have to get in the whole world of getting CALs and Project Professional licenses unless that's the direction you want to go. You really have both options there. So that's really the good news here. You can maintain your strategy around end user licensing. The downside is there's some infrastructure behind this. And as we mentioned, there is going to be a period where we're going to have to determine, where's the application going to live. There is going to be some server licensing that's required here. There is the Project Server Subscription Edition license at the top, and that's the application license that, depending on the architecture, you may have 1, 2, or 3 of those. The SharePoint Server Subscription Edition, some of these are actually covered in most people's enterprise agreements based on having an E3 or an E5 license. So that may already be covered. You get on-premise rights when you use online services. So that's something, but you're just going to have to think about that from a planning perspective. And this is going to live on a traditional SQL and Windows base. So, having access to those kind of technologies, whether you're hosting it or having it hosted by a third-party provider, you have both options there. So this is just the additional part of it you're just going to have to think about and budget for. There's a little bit of planning and architecture based off, the size and scale of the system. We do have a link here we're providing, and we'll send you a copy of the presentation if you're interested, that actually links into the software requirements for Project Server SE. So now let's really walk through what it takes to do a successful migration. And there's really 4 key steps to a successful migration. The first stage is the migration planning. And this is where you're building a very solid migration plan that includes a full migration checklist, all of the activities that need to occur to go through a full migration. We also use this phase to build out target technical environments for the new solution and a staging environment where the data is going to be moved as we're doing the actual migration itself. Also during this phase, we're building a communication plan that outlines what projects will be migrated and when they will be migrated, so you can communicate the changes to your end users, when they're going to be using which systems, and where they're going to see their data. Understanding this is going to happen in a series of what we call batches. These batches are going to be staged over a period of time, because let's say you have 500 projects. There's no way to actually just take those 500 and move them all at once. We literally have to use some tools to get them out of one environment, publish them in a new environment, synchronize the data, synchronize the resources, set up the SharePoint site, synchronize the SharePoint site, and migrate that over. So there's an entire process. And we typically batch these at about 75 or 100 in a given week. And then we have to support that. So we're actually working in both systems. So you have people working in System A, Their batch completes. They're now working in the new Project Server SE environment, and then we move the next batch of projects in the next batch. So there's a staging and communications here. And finally, during that first phase of planning, you're finalizing your overall migration strategy. What is the timing going to be? How long is it going to take? How do you communicate all of this? Really having a detailed project schedule behind it. The second phase is the dry run, and dry runs are absolutely critical to successful migrations. We do a dry run of the system configuration. We set up that bridge reporting, as we mentioned, that's required for any production migration. Then we do a dry run of a subset of the schedules and the SharePoint content, start to build out the reporting connection between the SE database and Power BI. So you're really setting everything up for the migration and testing it and using that to really finalize your overall migration plan. Then the stage 3 is really the production migration. This is where we're performing the actual migration of the projects, the resources, the SharePoint sites, the content. We're doing a snapshot of any of the timesheet data you've got, configuration and reporting. A historical snapshot may be taken just to support that history. So you're really going to want to decide during planning. Maybe we take stuff from 3 or 4 years and before that, and we'll snapshot that. And all the stuff within the last 3 or 4 years of current projects, we're going to move over. So that's really going to play into your migration plan. Okay. Critical is if you have a very large number of projects, this move is going to, and you only have a limited amount of time, you really want to think about snapshotting some of that data. We then perform a full validation of the data, keeping in mind you'll be onboarding different users in the system as you migrate their projects over. So you'll need to really determine a support approach here for those users so that as you're continuing the migration. And that production migration is really a cycle of migrate a batch of projects, validate those, deploy them into production, then we go on to the next group and the next group and the next group. And even though there's not a lot of change to the user experience, there really isn't any, things will come up. So you want to definitely think about how you're going to support those users. The fourth phase, and this is actually now you're fully up and running in the new production system. You're going to be prepared for any questions from users, ready to support them, getting a little admin refresher. Our experience here is that going through these 4 stages can lead to, if you do this properly, it's very, very low drama. It's very well planned, and it's executing a migration based on a timetable that you're putting out there that's planned out from the beginning. And this really sets you up for success. What does the timeline look like? It completely depends based on the amount of data and how much needs to go through that production migration phase. So people say, how long can it take? I mean, we've had migrations go 6 to 8 weeks. We have some go 15 to 20 weeks. Again, it depends on the content, the size of the database, the amount of data that needs to be moved in those different areas. So this is really our approach from a migration perspective that we've seen successful. If you're going down this road, what are some really good practices based on some migration experience we've had pretty recently? And we've been doing migrations kind of between these platforms for several years now. The first of one of those is be very realistic about your timeline. If you think you're going to do the whole thing over one weekend, it's a really difficult thing to do. These are planned over multiple weeks for a reason. So you have plenty of time to test, communicate the changes, roll it out. You don't confuse the users. So come up with a realistic timeline. At this point, there's about 11 months, depending on when you watch this video, between now and when the system is going to, Project Online is going to be sunset. So really think about a timeline that maps to when you have the time available to do this. You also want to determine the data you absolutely need to keep. What can we just get rid of? What can we purge from the system? We don't need that history, even if we don't want to snapshot it. And then this is the data we absolutely have to have. Just migrate that and think about maybe taking a lot of your older projects and just pulling them down as MPP files or SharePoint sites, migrate them over to another SharePoint site collection. It's okay to do that, just if you think you might need that data, but really focus on the data that's critical. And remember, as we mentioned in the last slide, planning is everything here. Really laying out a solid plan. That's really going to help you get the management buy-in you need to actually execute on this successfully and make sure you're communicating to the users properly and everything is planned out in a way that makes sense. Really want to think about developing that solid communication strategy with your end users and your management team from day one so there's absolutely no confusion about what's going on. Part of that has to do with reporting. You're obviously doing reporting on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. Probably going to need to keep that up. And a big part of that is setting expectations in terms of what data is going to be available when in which reports. And part of that is also there's going to be certain periods, downtime, where people aren't going to be able to use the system because their data is being migrated. So communicating that and managing that communication can lead to success. So there's absolutely no confusion. Treat it like a strategic project. You also want to plan for that bridge reporting we mentioned a couple of slides ago. If you have data that requires a batch migration, if it's over 50 or 100 projects, think about having a bridge reporting solution that's going to pull data from both systems so you don't have multiple weeks of downtime where you can't do reporting, or think about an offline strategy for reporting. And also, when we talk about those batches, our experiences, you really want to think in terms of 50 to 100 a week. It's a mind-numbing activity to move projects from one system to another, doing a certain amount in a day. There are some tools out there that can help with this, but you're still doing the same process. You still have to sit in front of a computer and validate it. So it's one of those things where you kind of think logically about what's reasonable and the number you can do in a given week, and then use that to communicate your transition in the period around it. And then you have a transition period after that, you move on to the next batch. And finally, consider using this as an opportunity for improvement. Hey, we really want to get better at our project online system, but do that after you shift it. This is a time-based move. And if it doesn't happen by then, the system is literally going to go away. So think about those improvements as you're doing this, but make that maybe an enhancement phase after you do the migration. And frankly, if you have a day job, if this is not something you want to do for the next 60 to 90 days or however long your timeline is, look for some third-party help. A lot of firms like us at PROJILITY, we really focus on this. We can help you get there fairly painlessly. So really our goal today was to give you kind of some background in terms of the changes are coming, the different components to migrate, what a successful migration strategy looks like. How do you get started? Our team has been developing a clear migration strategy around this for quite some time. And when Microsoft, kicked in the messaging, we were ready for this. We're trying to make this as painless as possible. We can definitely guide you through the options, whether you're looking at Project Server SE for kind of an as-is move, or you're looking at Planner Premium. Hey, you want to kind of make a platform move. So we can help you make the right fit. We also have some tools that can assist with the migration effort to automate things where we can. So we offer services not only help you migrate your solution, but also support and maintain it, something called expert care. So you have a tier 3 support mechanism to reach out, get any kind of technical or business help or Q&A help or enhancements you need. So if you would like to talk about specific situations you have, feel free to reach out. Our email address is here, info@projility.com. You can go to our website and submit a request there. We'll definitely set up some time to review your current environment, send you out a specific migration assessment, and then we'll provide you with very tailored recommendations and migration advice, as well as licensing recommendations to make this migration as smooth as possible. Our contact information is here. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you just want to discuss your specific needs. Okay. At this point, I'll hand the presentation back to Annie, who can go through any questions we have in the queue. Annie?
Thanks, Rob. We'll now open the floor to questions and answers. Remember to enter your questions in the questions and answer manager at the top of your team screen. I'm not seeing any questions in the queue right now, but we can pause momentarily and let you type away. Thank you again for joining our webinar today. We appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you online for our next session. Have a great day, everyone.